Hey guys, Ava Landen here, and we are now on to quilting. What you're going to do is position the quilt and the whole quilt sandwich. You're going to position it through your machine. We're actually going to start in the center. So you should have both sides rolled up. So that's one side, and here's the other side, which is through my machine. What we're going to do is we're actually going to start off of the quilt. Off of the quilt top when you start sewing initially. The reason that we're going to do it this way is because usually when you're using a free motion quilt, you have to pull up the threads, but with your with your walking foot, it becomes a little difficult to do that. So if you start off and you get and really not start that far off, about a ½ inch away from the actual quilt top, you're going to start sewing, and what will happen is at the back of on the back, you might get what's called a bird's nest. It's just where the thread's not up. For what we're doing today, that's okay, because if you start at least a ½ inch away from the quilt top, we're going to end up cutting all of that off, because we're going to trim this whole thing down to about ๑/4 inch when we go over and actually start to bind it. Now the thing is, like I said, I have a cold. It's about the end of the day, and my voice is pretty much going, and I think my cold medicine has all but worn off. So please bear with me if I have problems finding words. What we're gonna do at this point, and you'll see me right now, I'm actually picking some of the threads. I didn't do a great job of clipping all of the threads. If you do see threads that are kind of loose, or even small ones, you're just going to go through and you're going to clip them. Now this isn't on the block that I'm going to sew, so I'm fine there. I've gone ahead and did a couple of stitches. We're going to keep going to the end. What you're going to do is you're going to take the edge of this walking foot and you're going to align it to the seam that goes through. Now if you've sewn your blocks perfectly, then it won't be a problem, because what'll happen is you'll line it up here, and then when you get to this next block, you'll line it up there, and you're just going to continue sewing all the way down. So let's see, I've actually put the majority of the quilt in my lap, so I know you can't see it right now, but since this is going a long way, the quilt top is in my back. As far as sewing, it's in my lap. The reason it's in my lap is because I can gradually pull up fabric. Plus, as long as the quilt isn't hanging off the edge of the table too much, you don't get a pull, and so it doesn't feel like you're fighting your quilt. I really want this to be kind of smooth, and if you put the majority of the fabric in your lap, it just makes it a lot easier to help ease it through the machine, and the gravity's not pulling on it as much. As far as sewing it, you're going to sort of put your hands in a triangle, and what the purpose of your hands is to, well, actually they serve two purposes. It's gonna be to help ease the fabric through the machine, as well as smoothing out any bumps. So that's why we actually start in the center, is because what we're gonna do is continuously smooth out everything, and as we smooth it out, it's going to any sort of ripples will just flow to the edge, and because we have so much extra backing fabric and batting, it'll work out perfectly, and no one will ever know that your quilt top moved. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing just to show you what we're going to do. You'll notice that I do sew fairly slowly. Generally, you're going to sew somewhat slowly when you use a walking foot, and the main reason is because this thing is kind of heavy, plus it's attached to your machine, so you don't want to try to zip through this as fast as you can. So take your time and go through, and what we're going to do is sew one line down on each side of the seam. So now that you see that we're sewing on the right hand side, I like to do mine continuously, so I'm going to sew everything on the right hand side, and then I'm going to come back and sew everything on the left. If you want, you feel free to sew right then left, or left then right. I'm not entirely sure which is your dominant hand. It's pretty much like your goal at this point is to keep the lines as straight as possible, And that's why we're going to use the edge of the foot as a guideline. That's right at 1/4 inch for my walking fit. Generally, they're all about the same size. They may be slightly different from machine to machine. The important thing here, though, is not so much the 1/4 inch that you're sewing, so much as it's even and straight all the way down. And so what you'll notice is that I am stopping every now and again to reposition it. You'll probably need to do this just because of the size of the quilt, and especially if you're sewing on just a regular consumer machine. And what your hands do is you're just going to keep the fabric that's going through the machine as flat as possible. And it's really going to make your quilt look nice. You will notice that I am missing some of my pins. It's not that I don't like basting, it's just that I am a little behind on the tutorial, so I went ahead and did a few pins, basted it, but I mean I've been quilting long enough now that I can kind of keep everything together.